What's going on, everybody? It's Game Unboxing Reviews here, and welcome back to another LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga news update. So, in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the new gameplay overview trailer. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so first off, here we have one of the final sequences in Episode 6, and if we look in the background of Luke's fight with the Royal Guards in the second Death Star, we can see a green hologram of a key. So clearly, the player has the option to find a specific key to unlock that door, which I can see being a common theme in other interiors in the game. Next, we see a cutscene from Episode 3 where Anakin confronts Palpatine in the Chancellor's suite on Coruscant, which is a great example of how this game will recreate scenes from the movies that the previous games never adapted. And if you look in the background of Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel on Mustafar, you can see C-3PO on the right platform and R2-D2 on the left one. So the final level in Episode 3 could differ quite a bit from what we all played in the original game. Now here we get a much better look at the clip that was shown at Gamescom last year, featuring Maz Kanata, Kylo Ren, Dio, Boba Fett, Queen Amidala, Darth Maul, Ben Kenobi, Chewbacca, Han Solo, Mace Windu, Luke Skywalker, Rey, C-3PO, Princess Leia, R2-D2, BB-8, Jar Jar Binks, Darth Vader, Wicket the Ewok, General Grievous, Rose Tico, Captain Phasma, Finn, Yoda, Poe Dameron, and Lando Calrissian. Moving on, we next see the episode select screen with animated dioramas for all 9 movies, which we'll get to soon, because this screen also shows us that players can only start episode 1, 4, or 7 at the beginning of the game. So for example, The Rise of Skywalker will remain locked until the player has completed The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, which makes sense, but I love that players still have the option to pick which trilogy they want to start playing. Now then, let's go through all of the dioramas, starting with the prequels. So first up we have the Phantom Menace, featuring Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan as they try to cut through the conference room door before a droideka intercepts them. Then we have Attack of the Clones, which features Obi-Wan, young Boba Fett, and Jango Fett with his fire spray ship on Kamino. And lastly, Revenge of the Sith, which highlights Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel on Mustafar. Now onto the original trilogy, A New Hope shows Luke drinking a carton of blue milk in his land speeder, with Ben Kenobi, C-3PO, and R2-D2 on Tatooine. Then The Empire Strikes Back includes Chewbacca, Han Solo, and a probe droid on Hoth, and Return of the Jedi features Paplu the Ewok riding a speeder bike on the forest moon of Endor. Finally, we have the sequel trilogy. So The Force Awakens shows BB-8 near Rey as she makes bread on Jakku, and we can also see the salvaged X-Wing pilot helmet and her speeder. Then The Last Jedi highlights Snoke's throne room with Kylo Ren and Rey, and The Rise of Skywalker shows Rey running on Pasaana. Up next, we have the first section of Episode 7 with Poe in a shootout against First Order stormtroopers on Jakku, where we can also see a Tito NPC and a First Order transporter. Next up, we see the first section of Episode 1 in the Trade Federation ship, featuring Qui-Gon in a battle with a droideka and security battle droids. Now, as a fan of the original game's negotiations level, former dev Chris Rumsey has teased that there may or may not be a really cool throwback Easter egg hidden here for players to find in the game. Here we see the first section of Episode 4 with C-3PO and R2-D2 trying to escape the Tantive 4, which shows us that the game will feature hazards such as hanging wires that can electrocute the player when they walk into them, demonstrated by poor 3PO here. Now here we see the aftermath of Episode 1's Battle of Naboo, where Jar Jar, Captain Tarfful, and Gungan soldiers and warriors play bowling using an energy ball and battle droids. And at the end of this clip, we can also see a Cardu, an AAT battle tank, a Famba, and Tarfful with a frog-like creature on his shoulder. Next up, we get a look at Episode 2's Battle of Geonosis, featuring 2 Republic gunships being piloted by clone troopers. And if you look inside the first ship, you'll see Ki-Adi Mundi and Yoda, as well as Mace Windu with Kit Fisto, while the second ship holds Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin. Here we get another look at the Battle of Naboo, this time from the perspective of the battle droids, which gives us a much better look at the AAT battle tanks and some multi-troop transports. Up next, we see Rey fighting with her staff against Unkar Plutt's goons on Jakku, and in the background we can also see a Happabor and BB-8. Next, we have a sequence from Episode 6 in Jabba's Rancor pit, where we see Luke lodge a bone between the creature's teeth, and as he is dropped to the ground, we can also see a Gamorrean guard to his left and a skeleton near the gate, so the guard will likely be the co-op character in this level. Here we have Rose Tico, who is chasing after a mouse droid in Mustafa's Separatist Council war room, but we could also see a 501st Legion clone trooper with the wrong arms and a prompt above their head, so they they could potentially need the player's help in a quest to find their correct arms to complete the armor. Now here we see Poe Dameron fighting a heavy gunner stormtrooper before using his grapple gun to hit one of the technicians. We can also see other troopers nearby and a TIE fighter pilot, but what you might not have noticed is the trooper torso floating above an icon, which could indicate that the disguise feature from the original games is returning. So maybe now we can put on a complete disguise rather than just a helmet. And just before we move on to the next shot, Chris Rumsey has also teased that these areas in the game are huge, so much so that when the player is inside them, it feels like they're playing in a giant Lego set. Here we see R2-D2 grab and slam one of Mustafa's lava miners into the ground, and I love the design of these guys, so it's really cool to see them in the game. Next up we have Darth Maul force choking a First Order officer, but we can also see a droid approaching him who has the same body as K2SO's official Lego figure, and I think this could be a First Order security droid from the Star Wars Resistance animated series. Here we see a Tusken Raider countering two stormtroopers with a spinning attack using a wrench, and in the background there are a lot of different NPCs, as well as a dewback and some of Tatooine's little scurriers, which we can see hopping around. Now here we have Finn, Jannah and BB-8 taking on Sith troopers during episode 9's Battle of Exegol, and in the background we can also see a crashed green Resistance X-Wing and a Resistance pilot sitting beside it, which leads me to believe that the pilot is none other than Snap Wexley. Not much to say about this next shot, but it does give us a glimpse at a section of episode 5 above Cloud City, where we see Leia helping two Bespin guards fight off stormtroopers. Again, nothing too special to point out here, but we can see a lizard scurry past Luke and Yoda as R2-D2 watches them train on Dagobah, and I just love the addition of wildlife in this game. It really helps each planet look and feel more alive. And here we see Rey using the Force to lift a chest, giving us our first look inside Luke's cave on Ahch-To, which does look pretty empty, but it's nice that players still have the option to visit it. Now in this next shot we see Ben Kenobi, a Bantha and two stormtroopers, one of which is dual wielding blasters in front of an Imperial shuttle, but the highlight of this clip is the Jedi mind trick, as we get to learn of all the options that will be available to characters with this ability. So there's Influence, Panic and Distract, which Ben demonstrates here as he makes a Bantha dance, causing the troopers to clap and cheer. Here we have Rey making her way down into the Sith Citadel on Exegol, where we can also see a Kyber brick on one of the statues. Next we see Queen Amidala confronting Nute Gunray outside Theed's royal palace on Naboo. And before we move on to planets, I just wanted to point out that as Poe runs towards his X-Wing on Ajan Kloss's Resistance base, we can see a Resistance pilot on the right. Now I'm not sure if this is an NPC or a specific pilot from the movies, but they have a unique design compared to the other pilots that I've seen in the game. So if you guys have any ideas on who this could be, let me know in the comments, as I would love to hear everyone's theories. Now here we see the galaxy map, which reveals all 24 planets that players can explore in this game. So we have Tatooine, Naboo, Coruscant, Kamino, Geonosis, Utapau, Kashyyyk, Mustafar, Yavin IV, Hoth, Dagobah, Bespin, Endor, Jakku, Takodana, D-Qar, Ahch-To, Cantonica, Krayt, Ajan Kloss, Pasaana, Kef Bir, Kijimi, and Exegol. Moving on, we're now going to break down multiple space scenes, starting with this shot which shows Poe's X-Wing above Coruscant, giving us our very first in-game look at the ship's HUD. So we can see listings for the Federal District, Uskru District, and icons, two of which are shaped like arrows, which I believe represent mission replay. And in the top left, the HUD reveals that Poe's jacket variant is piloting the ship, while the bottom left shows us the missile ammo and a speedometer, as the Aurebesh text below 4 when translated says speed. Now this shot is less revealing, as it only shows us that Han Solo's episode 5 variant is piloting the Millennium Falcon, but the next scene is one of my favourite moments in this trailer, because here we see Boss Nass taking on an Executor class Star Dreadnought in a Resistance Y-Wing. I mean, being given the freedom to mix and match content from all three eras of the saga is seriously going to offer unlimited roleplay possibilities, allowing players to be able to live out their dream Star Wars scenarios in this game. And before we move on to the next shot, I also wanted to point out that just before the end of this clip, we can see a TIE fighter pilot in the bottom right. So maybe when you lock onto an enemy ship long enough, it'll show you who's piloting it, which would be a nice touch. Lastly, for this set of space scenes, the HUD shows us more unknown icons and reveals that Finn's Krayt variant is piloting Poe's X-Wing above the planet Cantonica. But the most interesting thing to point out here is the green icon in the middle of the screen, which actually appears earlier on in the trailer in red before Poe's X-Wing reaches Coruscant. There's also a prompt on the right which states that new missions have been unlocked in Tatooine, which leads me to believe that this is the game's way of showing you any of the planets that are nearby which you can jump to. So maybe the icon was red earlier because the player hadn't yet unlocked the nearby planet. Here we get a great look at the Stormtrooper FN2199, aka Nines, with his riot baton. Next we see a sequence from episode 6 on the forest moon of Endor, where Luke is chasing scout troopers on speeder bikes, and we can also spot that a lantern bird flies past him. Here we can see a massive sequence involving a Gungan energy catapult during the Battle of Naboo, which just looks so awesome and is very reminiscent of the scope and scale of the battles that featured in LEGO Star Wars 3. Next we have Rey and BB-8 in a transport skimmer, while Finn, Poe and C-3PO drive a transport loader, but behind Rey we can see First Order tread speeder drivers, and if you look carefully you'll also be able to spot what can only be jet troopers on the back of the speeders. Here we see that multi-builds are returning, as the player has the choice for Leia to build either a laser turret to cut through the remains of a door, or use a water cannon to put out the fires. Now here's something that we didn't know about: multiple routes. The trailer shows us that during Poe's escape level in episode 7, the player can either charge in loud with their blaster, or find a stealthy way out of the finalizer. And while these are ways of progressing through a level, it would be amazing if this amount of freedom is also available to the player after they have docked inside an enemy ship during free roam. Next up, here we are in Coruscant's Federal District, where Padme's J-type starskiff lands in the Senate Plaza, and as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon run towards the Senate building, we can see the Jedi Temple in the distance, as well as two AT-DP walkers and Twi'lek statues, one of which the player can climb to reach the Kyber brick above. Next we see Qui-Gon in the Chancellor's suite as he runs towards the Senate Showdown level, where players will battle Palpatine as Yoda, which we actually got a glimpse of in the Gamescom trailer. And finally, for the Federal District, we see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon hopping into an air taxi, courtesy of a pit droid. And it's worth pointing out that this taxi uses the same LEGO model as Cad Bane's official speeder. So, could this be a hint that he is in the game? Well, maybe, but if not, I still think there's a chance that he'll be included in the Bad Batch pack. Moving on to Kef Bir, we can see the remains of the second Death Star in the distance, and on the island we can also see a Fortitude transport hauler. Now here's a location that I was really hoping to see in the game: the underwater Gungan city, where we can see Captain Tarfful and his fellow Gungans, and it is a fantastic recreation of what we see in the film. But the question I have now is, how do we access it? Does a cutscene play, or can we actually go to the lake and freely swim downwards to the city? Because that would be incredible. Next up we see Jango Fett and young Boba running through the Uskru district. There's also a few NPCs in the background, including a Juros, and I have to say that I just love Jango's idle animation. Seeing him spin his dual blaster pistols around is so cool. Here we get a great look at C-3PO and a mucky R2-D2 with Ewoks in their village on the forest moon of Endor. And if you watch as this Ewok approaches C-3PO, you'll notice that he actually starts praising the droid, which is a really nice detail. And we can also spot a Kyber brick prompt in the distance, which could indicate that this is a store where players can spend their Kyber bricks to unlock new content in the game. Now here we get an awesome showcase of Tatooine, where we first see Luke speeding through the desert planet in his land speeder, and we can also spot a Jawa in need. Next we see Luke again, this time approaching Jabba's palace, which has a Ronto in front of it. Imagine if we can actually ride that thing, that would be amazing. But we can also see a Rodian and a pit droid NPC, as well as a green objective. And here we have Luke standing in the middle of Mos Espa, where we can see several different NPCs in the spaceport, including Twi'leks, Rodians, a Biff, and even a calamari eating ice cream. Up next we can see Luke running towards an activity, and there's another NPC to his right who has a Kyber brick prompt above their head. Now the activity is called Shooting Gallery, and it involves 1 or 2 players shooting at as many Womprats as possible within the given time limit. So 2,500 points will win the player a gold medal and a Kyber brick, while 1,500 points earns them a silver medal and 500 gold studs, and 500 points wins a bronze medal and 250 silver studs. Here we have the interior of the Mos Eisley Cantina, where we can see the Cantina band with a prompt above their heads, as well as some Jedi mind trick goons, plus Ponda Baba in a bar fight with Chewbacca, and even an unknown NPC behind the bar, which is interesting because in episode 4 the character Wooher can be seen serving people, so I'm not sure why he's he's not here. Maybe he's off camera at the other end of the bar, or it's quest related and he's gone missing or something. We'll have to wait and see. Next we can see Ben Kenobi approaching a dewback and 3 investigating troopers, which leads into what I'd assume is a short quest. So maybe the Greedo prompt above the trooper's head indicates that the player has to find and bring him in. I mean, that would be pretty cool, and I wouldn't rule it out seeing as how the game features bounty hunter missions. But these conversations alone are already a really fun way of showing the galaxy's real-time reactions to events from the movies, which just adds more life to each planet. Here we can see a showcase of the game's collectibles, featuring IG-88 as he grabs a data card from Canto Bight, then we see Rey climbing to a Kyber brick on Ahch-To, and finally we see Anakin's Padawan variant hopping to a brick on Mustafar. Moving on, we're now going to be taking a look at upgrades. So the core upgrades, which are represented by a star icon, are currently unknown, and while we have some details on the upgrades for each character class, I will also be doing a lot of guesswork. So for the Jedi class, I think we have the Force to lift objects, deflect using a lightsaber, maybe Force stasis similar to Jedi Fallen Order, and the last icon could be Force heal. For the hero class, it appears that they too have a healing ability, and as I said earlier, I think disguisers might be back, but I'm not sure of the third icon, although the last one could indicate that there are areas only Rebel and Resistance characters can access. Now, Scavenger is a class that we know a lot more about thanks to a shot seen later in the trailer. So the first icon is clearly paint related, and the rest must be for the Net Launcher, Breaker Blaster, and Glider. But Scoundrel takes more guesswork. These icons could indicate that this class gains extra studs, something ammo related, the ability to slide, and sensing opportunities for impressive shots, which we see Han show off later in the trailer as he causes a bridge to collapse. Now the Bounty Hunter class shows an antenna icon, so maybe these characters can decode transmissions. The second icon is electric related, while the third could indicate the players can shoot 3 shots at once, and the last icon appears to be of the shock grenade, which Boba shows us later in the trailer can stun enemies. And the villain class is a tricky one. I'm not sure what the first icon could represent, but I think the second indicates the player will gain health from shooting enemies. I'm lost on the third icon, but I'd assume the last one is the Empire and First Order's equivalent to areas only they can access, if that is actually what the purpose of that upgrade is. Now then, Darkside is the class we know the most about, thanks to some detailed descriptions that we see in the trailer. So if you have the Fear the Darkside upgrade, enemies and civilians will have an increased chance of running away in fear and from a further distance. We can also see that this upgrade's current level is at 15%. Next, Force Push will knock back more enemies and objects over a wider range, with the current level giving the player an increase in range. Then we have Force Crush, which repeatedly damages enemies that are grabbed by the Force. And finally, for the Darkside upgrades, we have Dark Rise, which boosts the power and capabilities of Force Lift. We can also see that the current level allows non-droid enemies to be thrown, and if the player has 50,000 studs and 12 Kyber bricks, they can upgrade to the next level, which will enable them to throw Force-lifted enemies much further. And it's also worth mentioning that the player can deactivate any of these upgrades. Lastly, for upgrades, we have the droid classes, starting with Astromech. Now, I think the first icon indicates that these droids can talk to other Astromech droids like R2-D2, while the other icons could be related to scanning, hacking, and giving enemies an electric shock. And finally, for the Protocol droid class, I assume the first icon is related to C-3PO being able to fall apart as we see him do later in the trailer to access a vent. The second icon might be related to 3PO's ability to translate languages, but I'm not sure about the other two. Moving on, here we have Boba Fett using a shock grenade to stun enemies in Kijimi. But before that, we can also spot Luminara Unduli armed with her lightsaber. Next up, we see Darth Vader force choke and throw a Gamorrean guard from Jabba's barge, likely during free play in episode 6, but we can also spot that BB-9E is with Vader. Now here we have the trailer's money shot, a glimpse at the character roster. So at the top we have Luke, C-3PO, Yoda, R2-D2, Tarfful, Queen Amidala, Zori Bliss, and a Rebel pilot. And notice how each character's icon has a specific colour behind them to represent their class, while some are just grey, which I believe indicates that we won't be able to upgrade those specific characters. Now, it's obvious who some of these heroes and villains are, but the silhouettes took some guesswork. So, working our way down from the top, we can see Admiral Holdo, Aftab Ackbar, an Ahch-To caretaker, young Anakin, Padawan Anakin, Darkside Anakin, Applek the Knight of Ren, Aurra Sing, a battle droid, a super battle droid, BB-8, BB-9E, Babu Frick, Bale Organa, Bala-Tik. I think this could be Barriss Offee. Then we have Bazine Netal, Beaumont Kin, Ben Solo, Bib Fortuna, Biggs Darklighter, and Boba Fett. Next we see Young Boba, Boba Joe, Bulio, Boss Nass, Bosk. I think this is Cypher. Then we have C-3PO, Captain Antilles. This could be Captain Ki-Adi. Then there's Captain Panaka, Captain Peavy, Captain Phasma, Captain Tarfful, Captain Typho, Cardo the Knight of Ren, Carib Diss, Chewbacca, Chief Chirper, a 212 Battalion Trooper. This appears to be a clone trooper lieutenant, but I'm not sure why they have an antenna on their helmet, so maybe it's someone else. Anyway, next we have Commander Cody, Commander D-AC, Commander Gree, an Imperial Navy officer, which yes, I know doesn't fit the roster's alphabetical order, but I'm almost certain that is the design this minifigure is based on. Plus we have Count Dooku, Dio, DJ plus DJ's First Order officer disguise, Darth Maul, Darth Vader, an unknown character whose torso resembles a Resistance A-Wing pilot, but with a different helmet, so I'm not sure who that could be. And finally we have Dengar and Dexter Jettster. Now, many character icons also have blue and gold circles below them, which I assume represent other playable variants. So starting with young Anakin, we can see that he has 3 variants. So as well as his default appearance, I think versions of him wearing his pod racing helmet and Padawan robes could also be playable. Then we have Jedi Anakin, who has 4 unlockable variants. So going off what we've already seen, we know that his Episode 2 and Episode 3 designs are playable. So I'm thinking that his Force Ghost variant and potentially even his Clone Wars armor could also be unlockable. Now, Darkside Anakin only has 1 extra variant, so I'm thinking that this is either his hooded appearance or a battle damaged version of him. As for droids, we can see that battle droids have 6 unlockable variants, while BB-8 only has 2, and C-3PO also has 6. So for 3PO's variants, I think they could be based on his designs from Episode 1, Episode 2, plus his head on a battle droid body and a battle droid's head on 3PO's body, as well as his Episode 3 and Episode 7 designs. Next we can see that Captain Phasma only has 1 extra variant, which could be a battle damaged version showing her face. And we can also see that there will be a lot of unlockable clone trooper variants. Lastly, for Darth Maul, we can see that his hooded and caped appearance is playable, but we also know that a version of him without his hood and cape is also unlockable. And for Darth Vader, he only has 1 extra variant, which I think will be his maskless battle damage design. Moving on, we next see this shot of Captain Phasma inside a First Order interior, but notice how none of the troopers are even trying to shoot at Phasma, which suggests that players can roleplay as any side and the galaxy will react appropriately. Next we see another shot of Kijimi, this time with Babu Frick, and I believe he is with First Order Lieutenant Loden Cowell. Here we have Kit Fisto and Plo Koon in a fight with battle droids and super battle droids during Episode 2's Battle of Geonosis, but we can also see that mini kits are returning, so that's mini kits, Kyber bricks, and data cards, so there will be a lot of collectibles for players to find in this game. Next we can see Theed's Royal Palace on Naboo, where there's a few NPCs, including palace guards, but obviously the focus of this shot is Jabba the Hutt and Salacious Crumb, and it'll be interesting to see if Crumb is playable or a companion character to Jabba, like how Grogu is a companion to Din Djarin in the Mandalorian pack. Now this is interesting because as Obi-Wan is in a duel with Darth Maul, we can see Qui-Gon's head fall back onto his body, so this is probably the new way that characters return after the player has lost all their health in the game. Here we see Obi-Wan and Anakin flying the XJ6 airspeeder in a section from Episode 2, where the player will chase Zam Wesell through the night skies of Coruscant. Now here we see a section from Episode 7 featuring Han Solo, BB-8, Chewbacca, and a Guavian security soldier being chased by a Raftar as it rolls down the halls of the Eravana, which is of course very reminiscent of the boulder scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this whole section here is a really nice reference to 2 of Harrison Ford's most iconic roles. Nothing too interesting to mention here, but I did want to point out that as Rey is in a duel with Kylo Ren, we can also see in the background that Finn is dealing with a First Order snowtrooper, who appears to be throwing thermal detonators at him. Here we have Luke's Rebel pilot variant, piloting his X-Wing during Episode 4's Death Star trench run. We can also see the new stud counter, and it appears that the player can unlock 3 Kyber bricks per level, plus a medal for filling the silver, blue and purple stud counters. And last but most certainly not least, we have extras. So using studs and data cards, players can purchase several cool extras, and some of the ones that we know of so far are studs times 4, studs times 6, studs times 8, studs times 10, Super Gonk Droid, Porg Companion, speaking of which the game's official Twitter account just released this fun new screenshot, and for the extras we also have Baguette lightsabers. But that's not all, because we also have detailed descriptions for some of the other extras. So Galaxy Rave turns the galaxy into a fun disco for all to enjoy, Television mode adds an old-timey screen effect to the game, Hologram mode gives playable characters a hologram look, Retro mode adds a retro-style screen effect to the game, and the description also suggests that the player combines this extra with Mumble mode for a truly nostalgic experience. Gonk Civilians replaces all civilians with Gonk droids, Mumble mode, of course, replaces all voices with mumbles for that classic LEGO Star Wars experience, and finally, there are also extras for comedy weapons, rainbow effects, and cantina music. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this video, so I want to thank you all very much for watching, and as always, if you'd like to stay up to date with the latest news on LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.